Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our January Tick IPM Working Group webinar. On today's webinar, we have Emily Fontaine from the Rutgers Center for Vector Biology, and she will be presenting on New Jersey Ticks for Science, engaging the public in tick surveillance, education, and prevention. So our working group is a project of the North Central IPM Center, and we are funded through the Crop Protection and Pest Management Program through the USDA NIFA. We're on an annual funding renewal with them that allows us to put on these webinars as well as the Tick Academy. So for those of you new to us, this is a project of the IPM Institute and our Sustainable Communities Group. And in our Sustainable Communities world, in addition to the Tick IPM working group, we also maintain the Pest Defense for Healthy Schools, which is all about getting more IPM implemented in K through 12 facilities. And then we also manage our certification program for pest management professionals called Green Shield Certified. You can find us on YouTube. This is where the recording of this call will be uploaded to, as well as on X and Facebook. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it for today's presentation. I'm going to hand it over to you, Emily, and while we are doing that, we will launch the pre-quiz poll. So I will stop my screen share.
Perfect, thank you. All right, and should I allow some time for people to answer that poll, or should I just get started?
I would say that you can just get started here.
Okay, perfect. All right.
And I will end the poll in a minute.
Okay, thank you so much. So hello, everyone. My name is Emily Fontaine. I work at Rutgers in the Center for Vector Biology as the project coordinator for NJ Ticks for Science. I've been working here since 2023. I'm also certified to teach high school and middle school biology here in New Jersey. And today, what I'm going to be talking to you all about is engaging the public in tick surveillance, education, and prevention. So I just said that I'm the project coordinator for NJ Ticks for Science, but what is NJ Ticks for Science? It's a citizen science project that was started by Rutgers in 2022 to help the public learn more about ticks and tick-borne diseases, and to also provide a resource where submitters, where New Jerseyans can submit ticks to us for free identification and testing. So if you encounter a tick in New Jersey, what you can do is you can send us that tick, and then we'll identify that tick and then we'll test it based on its species identification. And then our goal is to provide those results back to submitters and put those results on a tick map showing the infection status based on different counties in New Jersey, and also just their prevalence across the state as their different species. So why would we start a program like NJ Ticks for Science? Well, because in New Jersey and really in the Northeast, ticks are a gigantic problem. So if we look at this map here, we can see that it represents Lyme disease cases by state of residence in the year of 2021. And the green on the map represents Lyme disease cases reported. And so here we see that New Jersey is entirely green. So to me, this shows that there was a Lyme disease case reported in every part of the state. So Lyme disease is a big issue here in New Jersey. And then in 2022, that number rose to nearly 6,000 cases of Lyme disease. Between 2021 and 2022, there was a case definition change in what a Lyme disease case is. And from that case definition change, we did expect to see a 20% increase in case reports. However, that number rose to nearly 6,000 cases, which is about a 40% increase. So that was greater than what we expected to see, even with that case definition change. And then in 2023, that number rose to 7,224 cases of Lyme disease. And so really what this shows is that Lyme disease case reports are on the rise. And also these numbers are only representative of the case reports that were reported to the state, and they should actually be much higher. And this can be because people don't realize that they were even bit by a tick. Ticks are really small. Nymphal ticks are about the same size as a poppy seed. Adult ticks are about the same size as a sesame seed, so they can easily go unnoticed. And also Lyme disease symptoms can be kind of nebulous or ambiguous, so they can be hard to figure out whether you're just feeling tired, it's a viral infection, just something going around, or if it's Lyme disease. So if people don't realize that they were bit by a tick, then they might not even think to get tested for something like Lyme disease. So I just talked a lot about Lyme disease. And if you take one thing from my talks, it's that there's more than just Lyme disease. So this figure here represents ehrlichiosis, anaplasmosis, spotted fever rickettsiosis, and babesiosis. And we can see that from 2001 until 2022, there was a drastic increase in these different tick-borne disease case reports. And interestingly, these case reports are reported in the hundreds, not in the thousands. So that is why Lyme disease gets a lot of the limelight, because it is more prevalent. However, really, this is to show you that other tick-borne diseases have been on the rise since the early 2000s, and it's something to be aware of. And so briefly, we are going to go back to those Lyme disease cases, the 7,224 that were reported in New Jersey in 2023. And so I bring this up because for those people that were diagnosed with Lyme disease, I want to know which tick species is linked to Lyme disease. So I created this figure here that shows different tick-borne diseases and the different tick species that they're associated with. And these are just 4 common tick species that are found in New Jersey that are interested in biting humans. So here, if we look at our little chart, we see that Lyme disease, it's only linked to the black-legged deer tick. No other ticks here can transmit Lyme bacteria. It is only the black-legged deer tick. So we're going to get back to these other tick species in a little bit, but we're going to dive a little deeper into the black-legged deer tick. So here we see that the black-legged deer tick can transmit Lyme bacteria, but it can also transmit disease agents of anaplasmosis, babesiosis, encephalitis, relapsing fever, and then also it's under investigation. And this is because it could become a competent vector of a different pathogen that leads to a different tick-borne disease. So it's also important to be investigating this. So I also mention this because I test a lot of black-legged deer ticks, and sometimes they're completely uninfected with any pathogen. Sometimes they're just infected with Lyme, or sometimes they're just infected with anaplasma or just babesia. And sometimes I see them co-infected with multiple pathogens at the same time. It could be Lyme and anaplasma, Lyme and babesia, babesia and anaplasma. And most often I see co-infections with Lyme and another pathogen like babesia or anaplasma. And so I bring this up because those cases of Lyme disease, oftentimes when you go to the doctor's office and you say you were bit by a tick, they will only look for Lyme disease or only have a discussion with you about Lyme. But the black-legged deer tick is a competent vector of these other pathogens, and it could be co-infected with them. So let's just think about one of those cases of Lyme disease that were reported in 2023. So those people who were diagnosed with Lyme, they must have been bitten by this black-legged deer tick, and it must have been one that was infected with Lyme bacteria. Again, not all black-legged deer ticks are infected with Lyme. So what must have happened is this person must have unknowingly acquired a tick, and that tick must have been feeding for at least 24 hours or so, and that allowed the pathogen to transmit from the tick to the person, and then they were exposed to Lyme bacteria, and then unfortunately later on diagnosed with Lyme disease. So let's just say, for example, this tick was infected with Lyme bacteria and Babesia microti at the same time. And let's say this guy doesn't notice it for about 48 hours, because it takes Babesia about 36 to 48 hours to transmit, and it takes Lyme about 24 hours to transmit. If this person doesn't notice for 2 days that this tick is embedded and feeding on them, then it's possible for the Lyme bacteria and the Babesia microti to transmit to this person. And then it could lead to a later diagnosis of babesiosis and Lyme disease. And this is also important because Lyme requires a completely different treatment plan than Babesia. Babesia is more similar to malaria. It's a protozoa that infects the blood, and it doesn't require the same treatment. Typically, Lyme bacteria gets a dose of doxycycline or multiple doses of it. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not giving any medical advice or specific doses of medications. And then Babesia, from what I know, oftentimes requires azithromycin or ativaquione or a combination of the two to treat. So this is important because you could be infected with Lyme and another tick-borne pathogen like Babesia and need two different kind of treatments to fight them both. So say you were diagnosed with Lyme disease, it's possible that tick was infected with, say, Babesia as well. And it's possible that you can be recovered from the Lyme, but then still have symptoms of babesiosis, but be unaware because not a lot of doctors are as familiar with tick-borne diseases like babesiosis. Anaplasmosis, on the other hand, typically requires the same treatment as Lyme, so doxycycline would knock out both. However, I'm bringing this up because Babesia is so different from Lyme. So knowing this information can help you have better conversations with your doctor if you get bit by a tick. So now going back to these other tick species that I mentioned before, the Lone Star tick, it is not capable of transmitting Lyme bacteria, but it is capable of transmitting Rickettsia ewingi and Rickettsia chafiensis, which are pathogens associated with ehrlichiosis. It is also capable of transmitting the disease agents of spotted fever, and also it's linked to red meat allergy. The Gulf Coast tick is able to transmit the disease agents of tidewater spotted fever, and then the Asian longhorn tick is under investigation because here in New Jersey, it's not known to carry pathogens that lead to disease in humans. And actually the same goes for the American dog tick, which isn't featured on this slide. It'll be featured in slides coming up. So both the Asian longhorn tick and the American dog tick are not known to be carrying pathogens here in New Jersey that can lead to disease. So we actually only test the Gulf Coast tick, Lone Star tick, and black-legged deer tick. And I think that might have been the question on the poll. So I'll be mentioning that a couple more times in the presentation if you didn't catch it just yet. So if you encounter a tick, I know I just mentioned a lot of information about different tick species, different tick-borne diseases, and it might be hard to remember all of that. So if you encounter a tick in New Jersey, what you can do is you can send it to us and then we will identify that tick for you first online once you submit a submission form, and then we'll identify it again in person. And if it's a tick species that we will test, then we will test it using qPCR. And then we'll provide those results back to you and use them for our tick map that will be on our website in early spring or summer upcoming in 2026. So if you encounter a tick, what you can do is you can go to our website, ticks.rutgers.edu, or you could just search NJ Ticks for Science into Google and you'll be able to find us. And then this is our homepage. So what you do is you click send us your ticks. Then you click step 1, fill out the form and upload your pictures. Then you will reach a page like this, where you will enter in your submitter information, where you're from, then whether or not the tick was attached or not. And then you will also enter information about your tick location, as well as putting some photos of your tick onto the submission form. So these photos are really important because we could be able to give you an identification of your tick species sooner rather than later, in about 24 hours or so of us receiving this submission form. So if they're good photos, then we'll be able to provide you with that species ID. Unfortunately, sometimes we get some really blurry photos or out of focus photos, and we can't ID the tick right away. But really knowing that tick species is half the battle, because if you know the species, you know what you could have been exposed to, and then that can help you in conversations when you're at the doctor's office. So then once you submit your form, you're going to get an ID number. And this ID number, you want to screenshot, write it down, remember it, because this is how you're going to track your progress. And this ID number, we also have this as a way to keep the study anonymous. We're not interested in collecting information about you. We're just interested in collecting information about the tick. On our form, there is a place to enter your email. However, that is totally encrypted and nobody on this project has access to your email. But if you would like to receive updates on when your tick was received, when it was re-identified in the lab, and then when your tick testing results are available, that is what you're going to be using this number for. And then it will also pop up in your email. Hey, NJ Ticks for Science has an update for you. Go check out the website and type in your number. So then once we receive your tick, we're either going to identify it for a second time if we were able to identify it from the photos, or if we weren't able to identify it from the photos, then this will be our first time identifying it under the microscope. Then we will extract the tick's DNA based on its species. If it's an Asian longhorn tick or an American dog tick, we will not extract its DNA because we are not testing those ticks. But if it's a Lone Star tick, Gulf Coast tick, or black-legged deer tick, then we will extract it and then perform qPCR and test it for relevant pathogens. And then what you do to track your progress is this is another screenshot of our homepage. You just press track your progress. It leads you to a little page where you enter in your tick ID number, and then you'll end up on a page that looks like this. Well, hopefully not like this, because this tick ended up testing positive for 3 different pathogens. And this is actually representative of what the bottom of your submission page would look like. And in the next slide, I will show you what the top of a submission page would look like. But this is your final result, what you would have to scroll to the bottom to find. And this is not the norm. I don't commonly see ticks co-infected with 3 pathogens at the same time. But this tick is number 310. It's a little famous in the NJ Ticks for Science world because it did test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, Anaplasma phagocytophilum, and Babesia microti all at the same time. So this is an example of the co-infections that I was talking about previously. And it's something to be aware of because it can happen. It doesn't always happen, but because it can, this is something that you could then bring to a doctor's office and say, hey, I was bitten by a black-legged deer tick and NJ Ticks for Science let me know that it was really engorged, so you know that it was feeding for a long period of time, and that it did test positive for all 3 things. So if it was on you for a long amount of time, then it was likely able to pass all 3 things. And so then you might need treatment for all of these 3 different pathogens. And so here I have another example of a submission page. This shows more of the beginnings of what you would see right when you enter in your tick ID, right after you submit your form, and then the photos are reviewed. So this is before you receive your tick testing results. So once the form is received, we mark that, then we mark when the photos are reviewed. And in this case, I'll show you the photo of this submission on the next page, but based on the photo, it looks like it's a Lone Star tick. It's probably a Lone Star tick because we know that in photo IDs, it's not the same as seeing it in real life, but we are pretty good at identifying ticks just through photos. So we said that it's a Lone Star tick that appears to be a male. And then over here, another unique feature of the NJ Ticks for Science page is that we have a chat box feature where people can enter in any questions about their tick. And also here we have, please do not enter any personal identifiable information into here, because like I said previously, if you wanted to go search 310 in the track your progress page of NJ Ticks for Science, then you could. So any messages here are technically available to the public. Somebody would have to type in your specific ID number to see these chats, but as long as you don't put any personal identifiable information, that is good. Also, I do have the power to delete messages, and in rare cases when people accidentally put in something, I go ahead and delete that so that it's not available for anybody else to see. So getting more into this submission and the conversation that I had with the submitter, they asked me, does this type of tick carry Lyme? And I let them know that, hi, your tick was identified as a Lone Star tick, and this tick species is not capable of transmitting Lyme bacteria. However, it is capable of transmitting Rickettsia chafiensis and Rickettsia ewingi, which are linked to the tick-borne disease Rickettsiosis, and we'll be testing it for those two different pathogens. And then this is a totally different example. It's number 6228. And this submission photo, as you can see, is very unclear. We can't see whether it's a tick or not. Like, to me, it just looks like a dot on a tissue. So we actually started the conversation with them upon reviewing their submission photos, and we let them know, unfortunately, these photos are out of focus. We can't tell it what it is just by looking at the photo, but if you mail it to us, then we will be able to give you that species identification once we can look at it under a microscope. And if it ends up being a Lone Star tick, Gulf Coast tick, or black-legged deer tick, then we will be testing it. However, if it's an American dog tick or an Asian longhorn tick, then we won't be testing it. And then also this lets people know, if say they're a good tick IDer themselves, if they know for a fact that it's an American dog tick, or if they took it somewhere and they found out what the species was before sending it in to us, then they can save a stamp if it's an American dog tick or an Asian longhorn tick, because they know that it won't be tested. So here, 6228 asked me a question after I had sent them that message saying that we couldn't ID the photo. They asked me, would it be tested for Lyme? And so by July 11th, we had received the tick in the mail, and I let them know that it was actually identified as a black-legged deer tick, and that we would be testing it for Lyme, Anaplasma phagocytophilum, Babesia microti, and Borrelia miyamotoi, and that their tick testing results will be available in the next week or next 2 weeks. And this was during July, and we were receiving like 400 submissions a week. So when we're receiving lots of tick submissions, tick testing results can be delayed a little bit. However, it's really typically 1 to 2 weeks that you will get your results. And as I've mentioned, knowing the species identification is half of the battle, because if you know the species, then you could know what you were exposed to. And also testing for Lyme disease often takes a couple of weeks for you. When you're getting a blood test, it usually takes a couple of weeks to show up in your blood work. So us getting these results back in a week or so is pretty standard, and it takes time for us to identify the tick, extract its DNA, and then do the testing and upload all of those results. And when we're receiving 400 ticks a week, 400 results to upload, it actually takes a lot longer than you might think. So here we can see that from 2023 to 2025, we've received 6,575 submissions in total. And those were Asian longhorn ticks, American dog ticks, Lone Star ticks, and black-legged deer ticks. Oh, and also the Gulf Coast tick. And of those, we tested 1,490 black-legged deer ticks, 5 Gulf Coast ticks, and 2,156 Lone Star ticks. And so in the next couple of slides, I have some figures that show the makeup of the black-legged deer ticks that we received, the different stages we received, and their infection status. And I also do this for the Lone Star ticks. I didn't do it for the Gulf Coast ticks because we received so few. However, I just wanted to note that out of the 5 that we received and tested, 2 of them ended up being positive for Rickettsia parkeri. And actually one submitter, after getting their positive Rickettsia parkeri result, let us know that they were going to go to their doctor because they were feeling sick. And so we ended up putting them in contact, or we gave them a resource so that they could reach out to somebody in the CDC, because Rickettsia parkeri is the disease agent of tidewater spotted fever, and this could be a case of tidewater spotted fever. So if they go to their doctor and got it confirmed that it actually was, then they could have reached out to the CDC, and that could have been a confirmed case report. However, we don't know if that ended up happening because, again, this is all anonymous. We didn't ask for who they were, any of that information. So whether they did reach out to the CDC is unknown, but I think that it's cool that we were able to provide that submitter with that information. And it really goes to show why something like NJ Ticks for Science is important, because oftentimes when you go to the doctor, they're really only thinking about Lyme disease when you talk about a tick bite. And in this case, we were able to identify that this Gulf Coast tick was infected with Rickettsia parkeri. And also, this tick was only feeding, according to them, for a couple of hours. However, Rickettsia parkeri is a tick-borne pathogen that can be transmitted in a couple of hours, and in some cases, minutes. So this actually could be a true case of tidewater spotted fever. So again, just goes to show why something like NJ Ticks for Science is important. So now looking at our Ixodes scapularis, better known as the black-legged deer tick, or just known as the black-legged tick, or sometimes just the deer tick. I like to call it the black-legged deer tick because I know most people commonly know it as a deer tick, and then scientifically it's Ixodes scapularis. And here we can see that we've received well, I told you previously 1,490, and of those 1,059 were adults. So those were males and females. And the males that we received, males actually don't bite people. So these males were actually looking for females so that they could mate. So unfortunately, the males that we received were just guys who couldn't find their tick lady, and unfortunately they found someone who would send it to me, where then that male tick would be extracted and tested for different pathogens. So fortunately he didn't find his tick love, but he did find science. So then we have our nymphs, and we received 374, making up 25% of all of the black-legged ticks that we received. And then we received 30 larval black-legged ticks, making up 2% of all black-legged deer ticks that we received. And then over here, you'll see that 27, there are no other life stages of the black-legged deer tick. These are ones that we weren't able to identify through morphology alone, because sometimes ticks will come to us very, very disfigured. So in those cases, we can still test the tick. We just have to do a little bit of an extra step before. So in those cases, we barcode the tick. And then once we figure out what the species is through barcoding, then we test that tick for different pathogens. And in this case, 27 of those ended up being black-legged deer ticks. And then from the adult black-legged deer ticks that we received, 952 or 90% were female, and then 107 or 10% were male. And then when analyzing our testing results, I found that 30% of the black-legged deer ticks that we tested, the females that we tested, were positive for Lyme. And then looking at the other pathogens that we test them for, so we test them for Borrelia burgdorferi, that's the scientific name for Lyme bacteria, Anaplasma phagocytophilum, which is the disease agent of anaplasmosis, Babesia microti, the disease agent of babesiosis, and Borrelia miyamotoi, the disease agent of relapsing fever. And we found that it was there was an 8% infection rate of Anaplasma, 8% of Babesia microti, and 2% of Borrelia miyamotoi. And then just because I was curious, I incorporated the males into this as well. And the only thing that changed was Borrelia burgdorferi went up to 32%. This isn't incredibly significant or anything, but especially because black-legged deer tick males don't bite people. So really the number that we're more focused on is the 30% associated with females, because those are the adult Ixodes scapularis that are interested in biting people. And here I have the statistics for our nymphal Ixodes scapularis that we received, and 18% of them ended up being infected with Lyme bacteria, 5% with Anaplasma phagocytophilum, 7% with Babesia microti, and 1% with Borrelia miyamotoi. And again, both for the adult Ixodes scapularis and nymphal Ixodes scapularis, we see the highest infection rate with Borrelia burgdorferi, which is why Lyme disease gets all of the limelight, because it's what we're seeing most often. But we are still seeing these other pathogens come through throughout the year, even though they are on a much lower rate. And then when we look at our black-legged deer tick seasonality, this is a compound of 2024, 2025 data, and it just represents 1 year of black-legged deer tick submissions to NJ Ticks for Science. And oftentimes people will tell me, oh, I only have to worry about ticks during the spring and the summer. And I unfortunately am here to tell you that tick season is every season. So when we look at this figure here, we can see that we're receiving black-legged deer tick females from September all the way to January. And then we get more submissions in February, and then ending around July. However, really, as long as it's above 32 degrees Fahrenheit outside, as long as it's above freezing, then there will be ticks active, questing, looking for hosts. So we see that mostly females and males are being submitted from September to January, and then we see an uptick again from February until around June. And then nymphal season, or when we're seeing the most nymphs submitted to us, is May up until July. And then we do get some submissions of larval black-legged deer ticks. They're harder to see, so I think that that could also be playing a role in why we're not getting as many submissions. They're smaller than the size of a poppy seed. Actually, larval black-legged deer ticks are most often born uninfected or hatch uninfected. And this is because pathogens like Borrelia burgdorferi, Babesia microti, and Anaplasma phagocytophilum are not transovarial. Borrelia miyamotoi can sometimes, very rarely, be transovarially transmitted from mother to egg, and so they can hatch with it in very, very rare cases. However, as you saw in my previous slides, Borrelia miyamotoi is really rare. It was like 1%, I believe, in my previous slides for nymphs. So it's already rare as it is. So being found in larvae, and none of the larvae that we tested, I actually went back and I looked at our data, none of them tested positive for Borrelia miyamotoi, but it is a possibility. So we do test our larval black-legged deer ticks for Borrelia miyamotoi for that reason. And larval ticks are very, very small. And if you do happen upon some larval ticks, you might happen upon many of them at the same time, because ticks are laid in clusters and often they'll hatch at the same time. So I've encountered larval bombs before, but these ticks I'm not as concerned about, because larval ticks are hatch uninfected. And this is because ticks are vectors, meaning that they have to pick up pathogens most often from a blood meal. So they acquire them through those blood meals rather than hatching with them. So here, looking at our adult Amblyomma americanum, better known as the Lone Star tick, results, this reflects both males and females. I unfortunately don't have a graphic of a male Lone Star tick. I do make all of these tick graphics myself. They're not readily available online, unfortunately. However, now I do have some good graphics of black-legged ticks, Lone Star ticks. The only thing I don't have is a male Lone Star tick, so I do apologize for that. So this reflects both males and females, and we saw a 2% infection rate of Rickettsia chafiensis and 3% infection rate of Rickettsia ewingi. And then we saw a 1% infection rate for nymphal Lone Star ticks of Rickettsia chafiensis and Rickettsia ewingi. And when we think about this in terms of how ticks acquire pathogens, as I mentioned previously, they acquire them through blood meals. So at this point in time, it's a nymph, so it hatched. It was a larval tick. That larval tick wanted to become a nymph, so it needed a blood meal in order to have the energy to molt and become a nymph. So at this point in time, this nymph has only had one blood meal, whereas the adult Lone Star tick has had two. So this shows, this kind of reflects that because they have had less opportunity to pick up a pathogen because they've only had one blood meal, whereas adults have had two. So now here, looking at the Lone Star tick seasonality, we have more of a condensed season where we're receiving Lone Stars. It's not during the winter or fall months, really. It's mostly we're seeing females, males, and nymphs being submitted during the spring and summertime. So we start to see some submitted in early March, and then we see many of them be submitted during April, May, and June. So lots of females, males, and nymphs during this time. And then we did get some submissions of larval Lone Star ticks in July through September. And these we do not test because larval Lone Star ticks, they hatch uninfected. And there are no reported pathogens that can pass from mother to egg transovarially. So we don't test larval Lone Star ticks, but you are still welcome to send them to us and we will incorporate them in our data and our maps. And speaking of our maps, these are two of our maps from 2023 to 2024. And this represents the tick submissions that we were receiving throughout New Jersey. And so this reflects the submitter location, so where they're from. And then this map reflects the reported tick location. So really these two maps are the same, but what it goes to show is that we're receiving ticks from all over New Jersey, from all counties in New Jersey. And now looking more closely at different tick species, this is looking at the number of American dog ticks that we received. The darker purple it gets on the map, the more tick submissions that we received from that area. Fun fact, this is the town where I'm from. I put up a lot of flyers here. So I do wonder if that's why we received more American dog ticks from this location. And again, this reflects 2023 to 2024. We're in the process of updating our maps to include 2025 data, and those will be available on our website in spring or early summer of this year. And with the American dog ticks, we were receiving them really from all across New Jersey. Then looking at the Asian longhorn tick, it doesn't really look that similar to our American dog tick map. We do have one area where we were getting lots of Asian longhorn ticks. Somebody actually became like a big fan of the NJ Ticks for Science project, and they encountered lots of Asian longhorn ticks. So we kind of had a super submitter from this location. Asian longhorn ticks are more often to be biting animals like cattle, and also on dogs rather than humans. So this is also why we're probably seeing less submissions of Asian longhorn ticks, but who knows, maybe we'll get some farmers or submitters who have lots of animals in upcoming years. So this map could look different. And now looking at our Lone Star ticks received, we see again, the darker pink it gets, the more Lone Star ticks we received from that area. And we can see that they're more so found in southern New Jersey, in the coastal plains, the pine barrens. And this is also because the Lone Star tick is more desiccation resistant, meaning that it's less likely or less prone to drying out, so it can better survive in these coastal plain areas. And then this map reflects the number of black-legged deer ticks that we received. And we can see here that this map looks very different from the Lone Star tick map that I showed previously. Lone Star ticks were more so found in the southern New Jersey. Here we see that they're more so in central Jersey, northern Jersey. And this also reflects the habitat type that black-legged deer ticks are often found in, dense forests, and these areas of New Jersey are more populated with forests. And then how you can prevent tick bites from all of these different areas in New Jersey. I just showed you all of these different locations where ticks are being submitted. So you're probably like itching, being like, maybe I have a tick on me. But what you can do to prevent a tick bite before going out is you can wear light colored clothing. When I go out and I'm doing tick drags, I'm wearing like a white Ghostbusters jumpsuit. And what that does is it just makes it easier to spot the ticks. It's not a fashion statement, it's for science and to protect myself against ticks. And then another thing that you can do is you can apply a repellent that contains DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or IR 3535. And these are more so to be applied to your skin. When I'm going out into the field, I'm applying permethrin, which is an insecticide, to my white Ghostbusters jumpsuit. And permethrin, I don't have it listed on here just because it's toxic to cats. It's an insecticide. So it's a little bit more dangerous to use. You just have to make sure to read the directions on it before you try to use it. And again, be so careful if you have cats. And permethrin should not be applied to the skin. It needs to be applied hours before going out, and it has to dry on your clothes. And then usually what I do is I apply it the day before, and then I go out the next day once the permethrin is all dried, and then I'm all protected from ticks. And it really kills ticks dead. I have, at the end of a field day, seen my socks and there's ticks in them, but they're dead. So if you spray your jumpsuit, your socks, all of those things with permethrin before going out, then you can prevent tick bites. And then another method that you can do is you can tuck your pants into your socks. So I tuck my jumpsuit into my socks. And then I also will tuck my shirt into my pants. And what this does is this reduces access to the skin. The sooner a tick finds your skin, the sooner it's going to find a spot to bite. So by doing this, you're really making it harder for the tick to find your skin. And it also serves as a place where you can start your tick check, because you know that if a tick is on you, they had to have climbed all the way up in order to find your skin. So this can serve as a good spot to start once you do your tick check at the end. And always make sure to do a tick check after you go outside, especially if you're in the woods or tall grasses, because those are habitats where ticks are often found. And then if one somehow does get on you, you can remove it. First, I want to highlight that here, this tick is unembedded. We can see its hypostome here and two palps kind of splayed out. It's getting ready to bite. However, it hasn't yet. And sometimes people find ticks on them. And when we use the word embedded, sometimes people are confused. Embedded is when the mouth parts, when the hypostome goes into the skin, allowing the tick to start blood feeding. And then here we can see he spots the tick. And if you spot the tick early on, you can save yourself from a tick-borne disease sometimes, because when I was talking about Lyme bacteria and Babesia microti, those take hours, about 24 hours for Lyme bacteria and about 36 to 48 hours for Babesia microti to transmit. So if you find that tick early on, then you could possibly save yourself from a tick-borne disease. And again, what you want to do is either use tweezers, tick remover, or in a pinch, your fingers, because really you just want to get that tick out as fast as possible. The longer it stays embedded and feeding, the more likely that if it is carrying something, that it'll be able to pass that to you. So here we see the tick came out and its mouth parts are splayed. If the tick mouth parts get left in the skin, that is okay. Ticks can't continue to push pathogens in if their full body isn't attached. And then the head or the mouth parts of the tick will just excrete like a splinter would. And so when people say worrying about infection with mouth parts, most often that's because something is foreign in your skin. And so it's an open wound. So you want to treat it with like alcohol so that there's less of a risk of infection. And so if you're interested in learning more about NJ Ticks for Science, or if you liked any of the graphics that were presented today, for example, like the different species and what they can transmit, we have resources. They're available on our webpage. We also have them available in Spanish. And so if you want, you can go ahead and download those, or if you have a special request for material that you see here that isn't listed on our website, then you can email me and email on our ticks.rutgers.edu website, we have like a CVB questions email, and that will reach me as well. So if you want to use that email, It's on our website. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask. And this is the end of my presentation. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Emily. Excellent job. We don't have much in the way of questions in the chat, but if people would like to unmute their line and ask a question, you're welcome to do that. And I will start by just asking one question here. So I saw at the beginning of your presentation, you noted that it was 2022 or 2023 at the highest incidences of Lyme's disease. It was like 5,900 or something like that. Looking at your tick submission, you had like over 6,000 ticks submitted. Do you guys have a sense of what percentage of people become symptomatic with a tick-borne disease from the ticks that were submitted to your lab?
So we actually don't, because we don't follow up with people once we give their tick testing results back to them, because again, this is completely anonymous. So we can't really collect information about people and their health diagnoses after the fact. We are like considering doing some surveying and seeing how NJ Ticks for Science, like if this was helpful to them, if they did end up going and talking to their doctors about what information we provided to them. However, we don't usually hear back from people and say, oh, this tick tested positive, and then I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with Lyme. Those cases would interest me, but right now that's not anything that we are like collecting information on.
Great. Then another question here, curious as to why Powassan is not included in the information. Is it perhaps because it is too expensive to test for?
Yeah, so we have not, we don't have the testing materials for Powassan just yet. However, that is something that we are interested in doing. So we actually have a donate feature on our website if you're interested in donating. And we're also considering testing pathogens more relevant to dogs. There's a lot of different things that we want to do to expand our program. However, funding constraints are sometimes an issue. So we're really looking for the most prevalent tick-borne diseases, and Powassan is very rare. So far, it's just Lyme, Anaplasma, Babesia, and Borrelia miyamotoi. But Powassan is something that me and my boss have talked about a lot, and it's something that we're interested in doing. But right now, we don't have the resources to do it.
So on that note, are there other tick-borne diseases confirmed in New Jersey that you are not able to test for?
Well, for example, like Rickettsia canis, is something that we're not testing for, and that's for dogs. A lot of the time people will submit ticks from their dogs, and there are other tick-borne disease pathogens that are specific to dogs. And I am a dog lover myself, and so I would love to help people get more reassurance about like the tick that was biting on their pet. But unfortunately, we aren't testing for things like Rickettsia canis right now, but it's something that I'm interested in doing in the future. And
Great.
actually in March to May, we're going to have a crowdfunding campaign specifically for dogs. So if you're interested in that, check out the Rutgers crowdfunding page in March to May, because we're going to hopefully raise some funds so that we can test ticks for more dog-related pathogens.